At the beginning of our film, we hear a voice narrating that before the great flood that covered the earth, many difficult events started to occur. However, we are interested in a specific story, and this is just one of many stories that became a myth over the years. We learn that at some point, the world was ruled by creatures from other dimensions, known as the ancient rulers. The earth experienced a very dark period during their reign. In a palace on the island of Minos, everyone in the kingdom worshipped idols, especially bulls, which they considered to be very powerful creatures. Eventually, the Duck Empire grew, and with it, greed and avarice increased, along with the evil and madness that took hold of humans. The men were controlled by these demonic ideas, and they sacrificed the princess to the ruling bull. This resulted in the birth of a small creature, which made the Dark Empire even stronger. As the creature grew, so did its hunger. Finally, the monster was placed in a labyrinth so they could control it. Later, a new law was issued in the Minos Empire after the murder of a prince. The law stipulated that every 3 years, 8 people would be taken from their homes and placed in the monster's labyrinth to be sacrificed. As the 50th sacrifice approached, we meet a man named Theo, who is seen herding a flock of sheep with his friend Dano. While walking, they spot someone wearing a cloak from afar. Dano tells Theo that his father once told him that this man is a bad omen, and whenever someone sees him, something bad is bound to happen afterward. When Theo returns to the tent, he tells his father about what he saw in the forest with Dano, and he also expresses how much he misses his lover, who was taken to be sacrificed to the monster. He asks his father how many more people must be killed to appease the monster and avenge the prince who died long ago. His father tries to comfort him, but Theo is deeply upset. Meanwhile, Dano goes to talk to his lover Morna, telling her he's afraid of losing her when the soldiers come. At that moment, some of the village men gather along with Theo's father, who is the village leader. They discuss sending someone to kill the monster or fight to protect their children from being taken by the monster. They say that if they do this, people will no longer live in fear. One of the men asks why they don't just offer Theo as one of the 8 to be sacrificed. The leader replies that he can't do that because Theo is his son and he will inherit the leadership after him. One day, Theo sees wolves approaching his sheep from afar, so he runs to save them. Unfortunately, he arrives too late, and by the time he gets there, one of the sheep has already been killed. At that moment, Theo sees one of the wolves still nearby, but it runs away. Theo chases after it, but as he runs, he notices a tree carved with a strange symbol. As he looks around, he finds the entrance to the cave where the mysterious cloaked figure he saw earlier lives. Theo enters the cave and discovers that the cloaked figure is actually an old woman, with the wolf sitting beside her. Theo speaks to her about the symbol on the tree and tells her he recognizes it because he has the other half of it. At that moment, he shows her the broken medallion he wears around his neck and tells her that the other half of the medallion is with the girl he loves. The one they took to sacrifice to the monster is still alive. The old woman tells him that they took the girl, yes, but they haven't sacrificed her yet. She explains that she's in the labyrinth beneath the palace. But Theo doesn't believe the old woman, so she tells him that in order to save his beloved, he needs to kill the monster known as the Minotaur. All night long, Theo thinks about the girl they took from him. The next morning, his father wakes him up and tells him to take the sheep and leave because the soldiers are coming soon. Theo then tells his father that he spoke to the old woman in the cave and she told him that the girl he loves is still alive. He also says that if he wants to see her again, he must kill the Minotaur. His father, however, gets angry and tells him that the old woman is just telling nonsense and that no one has ever been able to kill the Minotaur up to this day. Later that day, they see the Empire's ships approaching from afar, and by nightfall, the soldiers arrive in the village and take the youths. Theo, sitting in the mountains as his father had told him, can't stop thinking about what the old woman said. Meanwhile, the soldiers are raiding the tents and taking the youths they find. Theo keeps thinking, remembering the girl they took from him, and then suddenly he decides to run back to the village. While the soldiers are walking with the 8 youths they need, Theo arrives and sneaks among the soldiers, taking the place of one of the girls without anyone noticing. At that moment, Theo's father sees what happened and feels deep sadness for the youths who were taken, not knowing that his son is now among them. In the next scene, we see the youths trapped in a large iron cage. Dano notices that one of them is wrapped in a blanket, and when he approaches to check on him, he discovers it's his friend Theo. After a while, Theo talks to another youth named Tyro who doesn't get along with him and tells him that he's going to kill the monster. But Tyro doesn't believe anyone can kill the beast, even though both of them secretly wish for the same thing. Each of the youths has their own beliefs about the monster, and one of the girls is convinced they should be proud of what they're doing. As they reach the Dark Empire, they are taken to Emperor Diocletian, who orders the soldiers to start the sacrifice immediately and take 2 girls first. In front of his throne, there's a pit covered with thick iron bars, from which the youths are meant to be thrown. Before Diocletian throws the girls in, Yu says the girls won't please the monster, but Diocletian silences him. He then calls for the kingdom's princess and takes an animal skull, making her inhale the smoke coming from it. The princess goes to the 2 girls and easily pushes them toward the pit. We then see the iron bars open. Meanwhile, Diocletian provokes the monster, which doesn't appear at first, but eventually shows itself, its horned shadow visible, followed by a roar that shakes the entire place. At this moment, Theo and Tyro decide to take advantage of the situation and attack the soldiers, but unfortunately, they fail quickly, and the soldiers defeat them. The princess orders the soldiers to take the girls away from the pit, while Diocletian instructs the men to prepare the pit to throw all 8 youths at once. Then he yells at the princess for speaking. In the next scene, we see the young men being held in a place until the soldiers arrive, take them away and mock them. Then we see the princess speaking softly to one of her servants, asking her to bring Theo because the old witch had warned her, saying he would come. When Princess Rafaela is locked in her room, Sayo attacks her, and at that moment, Rafaela asks him to help her escape from that place. But Deacon Leon overhears everything and sees it all. Rafaela tells him about the girl who came last time and hasn't died yet, and it turns out she is Theo's lover. Rafaela asks him to save her, and in return, she will help him. At that moment, Deacon Leon arrives with his men and orders them to imprison Theo. Theo tries to defend himself but is eventually captured. Afterward, Deacon Leon threatens Rafaela and orders his men to throw Theo into the monster's pit. After Theo is thrown in, the soldiers take the rest of the young men. Once Theo is in the pit, the young men enter the maze one by one but from different scattered openings in the castle. Theo hears the screams of his friends in the pit echoing everywhere, and he becomes unsure of what to do. Then he hears heavy breathing behind him, followed by a terrifying roar. The monster starts chasing its first victim to devour them. The first victim is the girl who said what they were doing was a duty, but unfortunately, her screams spread throughout the maze. Theo continues wandering in the maze and smells a strange odor coming from between the rocks. He starts using a skull to smell the gas, and after inhaling it, he begins to hallucinate, seeing his lover in front of him. Then he hears the sound of rocks from the end of the tunnel. When he reaches there, he finds Morna, who cannot speak, using the sound to guide her friends to follow her, just like she did with Theo. When Morna speaks to Theo using sign language, he doesn't understand her. Suddenly they hear a scream, so they run toward it to save their friend. On the other side, we see Veena, who is terrified, calling for help. As she moves the rocks in front of her to escape, she finds a decomposed body and leaves it. Suddenly, Dano appears, but Veena screams in shock. At that moment, Theo and Morna arrive, and they all start thinking about what to do. Veena tells them she wants to leave the place as soon as possible, but the others insist they need to find the rest first, even if they don't know if they're alive. Meanwhile, Rafaela is taken to Deacon Leon's room, where he is about to write on her, but when she sees one of the pits open, she runs to it, saying she's willing to sacrifice herself to the monster rather than marry Deacon Leon. On the other side, Theo and his friends reach the place where the girl was killed, finding blood everywhere, along with her clothes. They also notice the footprints of the giant monster. As they try to guess its size, Tyro arrives, covering Dano's mouth and signaling the others to remain silent because the monster is close. Tyro tells them he'll kill the monster himself but needs someone to act as bait. Theo volunteers to be the bait while the others hide, armed with whatever they could find. They wait for the monster to approach to attack it. After a while, they hear something approaching and they all jump on it to kill it, but they discover it's Rafaela. She tells them she's here to help and knows the way out and that her assistant is waiting for them. However, Vina doesn't trust her and decides to leave. Theo asks her not to go, but she starts arguing with everyone, saying she doesn't care about anyone and is ashamed of being born in this village, blaming herself for everything that's happening to them. As she rambles, the monster appears behind her. The creature kills with one of its horns, and as soon as everyone sees it, they start running. After getting some distance, they find their friend Didi, who is unconscious. However, Rafaela helps her wake up. They continue their way toward the exit Rafaela mentioned. While her assistant is waiting for them at the door, Duke Leon arrives and kills her. Finally, they reach the door, and Rafaela calls for her assistant to open it, but no one responds. They get scared and try to break the door, especially when they hear the monster approaching. Unfortunately, they can't escape in time and see the huge monster running toward them. The creature strikes one of the young men and roars loudly before killing his new victim with its horns, swinging wildly from side to side. Theo, Dano, and Morna run in the same direction, but Rafaela gets stuck and can't escape with them. Didi and Tayun run to a distant place in the maze, where they find water and drink to quench their thirst. On the other side, Theo and the others run aimlessly until they come across a strange man who tells them he's been there for a long time, living off rats and insects. He tells them to follow him, promising to lead them to a safe place. We learn that the man's name is Toraj. He leads them to a small opening between the rocks and shows them the small map he's drawn of the place since he's been there so long. Despite sounding crazy and rambling, he provides important information like how they can do what they want while the creature sleeps. Theo focuses intently on his words. In the next scene, we see that Rafaela is still alive, having escaped the monster and is wandering through the maze. On the other side, Deacon Leon is yelling at the creature as it stands near one of the openings, saying he'll go down and take Rafaela from it. We see him recklessly entering the maze and opening the door. At this point, Theo is convinced that Vina is still alive, so he pressures Toraj to tell him where she is, believing Toraj knows since he's been there for so long. But the shouting and their fight attract the monster's attention, and it begins to collapse the place. At that moment, they hear Duke Leon calling for Hyla, so they rush toward him. When cowardly Duke Leon hears the monster approaching, he quickly exits the door, leaving the soldier he brought with him, who the monster devours as soon as it sees him. Meanwhile, Theo presses Toraj to tell him where his lover is, and when he finds the necklace with the pendant he gave her, he becomes even more convinced that she's still alive. He takes the map Toraj made and forces him to show where she is. After Toraj points to a specific location, Theo decides to head there. At the same time, Didi and Tay are still wandering aimlessly, gradually growing fond of each other. Tay promises to get her out of there. They find an entrance to the castle and decide to climb out. After Tay climbs up and reaches the iron bars, he tells Didi to follow him and grab his hand. But as she climbs, the monster arrives and stands beneath them. Despite Tay telling her not to look down, Didi doesn't listen, and when she sees the monster, she screams, which catches its attention. Unfortunately, she loses her grip and falls onto the monster's horns. Meanwhile, Theo wanders through the maze, starting to hear his lover's voice. Suddenly, she appears in front of him. Overjoyed, Theo runs to her and hugs her, only to realize he's embracing her skeleton. At that moment, he understands that he now needs to help his friends who still need him. he leaves to find Dano and the rest of his friends. At the same time, Dano asks Morna to hide again in Toraj's shelter while he heads toward Theo. When he sees a shadow ahead, he calls out, but then he realizes something's wrong. As he gets the creature's shadow approaches, and he realizes it's the monster coming to kill him. When he realizes he won't be able to escape, he calls out to Theo, telling him to take care of Morna. At that moment, Theo hears his friend's voice coming from all directions, unsure of where to go. Then he hears a scream, and the monster kills his friend. This enrages Theo, and he throws his metal medallion against the wall. The impact creates a spark, igniting a fire, giving Theo hope that they might survive and escape this place. Rafaela then approaches him, revealing the truth about the Minotaur and the reason behind the sacrifices. She tells him that the one who killed the prince was the Minotaur, and to cover up the scandal, they made up a story blaming a man from Theo's village. This way, the villagers were forced to offer sacrifices in exchange for what had happened. Rafaela encourages Theo to fight the monster and defeat it, taking him to the gas source to prepare for what's to come. However, as they are there, the monster chases them and appears stronger than ever. At that moment, Tyro arrives, also furious and grieving Didi's loss. He tells Theo to run and then charges at the monster, but the creature stabs him with its horns as well. Despite his injury, Tyro continues to fight. Meanwhile, Theo leaves Rafaela in a safe spot, instructing her to hide underwater when the monster appears, while he goes back to face it. When he arrives, it's too late to save Tyro, who has already died. Theo shouts in anger, calling the monster to him, and the creature obliges, charging at Theo. But Theo leaps at the last second, dodging the attack, causing the monster to crash into the wall, opening a wider gap for the gas to spread. The monster staggers, dizzy from the gas, and part of its horn breaks off. Theo searches for the medallion to ignite the fire, but he notices it's caught on the monster's horn. With the creature still disoriented, Theo runs toward it and retrieves the medallion. As soon as he takes it, the monster sees Theo trying to escape to the same spot, so it charges at him again. However, Theo changes his path and heads toward Rafaela to escape the fire. Along the way, he strikes the walls with the medallion, creating sparks until finally a fire ignites and fills the room. Theo reaches Rafaela just in time as the flames engulf the monster, burning it alive. The explosion is so powerful that it causes the underground area to collapse, reaching the castle above. The fire even reaches Duke Leon and his servants, who perish under the explosion and the collapsing Minotaur statue. Theo and Rafaela emerge from the water, still fearful of the creature. Suddenly, they hear footsteps behind them and see that the Minotaur is still alive but severely wounded. As soon as it sees Theo, it charges at him, but Theo notices the broken horn lying nearby. He grabs it and stabs the creature in the mouth. The monster fights back fiercely, pushing Theo against the wall, but this forces the horn to pierce through its body, finally killing it. Afterward, Theo and Rafaela search for a way out of the maze. Along the way, Theo finds Morna and Toraj still hiding, and he brings them along. As they move forward, the place begins to collapse, but they keep going until they find an exit and see the sunlight. They find themselves in the main hall, where Duke Leon is badly injured but still alive. Rafaela goes to him and kills him to ensure a better future for the people, and that's where today's film ends. Stay tuned for more videos. Goodbye.